This is a DeMarie Productions podcast.
They're older gays, and so they like to go to older gay establishments.
What do you mean older gays? What's an older gay?
Above me.
An elder gay?
Like, I don't think my gays are going to Monster.
Oh, really?
The dork guy was super fucking racist.
Oh. Okay.
We talked about this, where I was like, oh, you're going to Monster? Don't go there. And then you're like, okay, cool, let's go to Pieces. Great, an even older fucking place.
And I used to live next to Ties.
What's that?
Ties. Somebody here has to know what Ties is.
Did you ever go to Splash?
No, not Splash.
I was like South Chelsea.
XS used to be the after work. Sex spelled backwards. XES. I know.
No,
you guys are a wonderfully creative
How
tribe.
long have you been in New York?
20 years? 20 years.
I'm just behind you. I'm at 17.
I know, which is kind of incredible for our age difference. You've spent like your whole fucking life here. I had a life before I moved here.
You know, I think people are really sensitive to throwing around the like, oh, I'm a New Yorker title. I will say, and like I very much held off for the longest time. Whenever it happens to me when I go back to Seattle, people are like, oh, you're a New Yorker now. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But now that it has officially been, like, I've never lived anywhere longer. I think that's when I kind of started to become comfortable with the idea of like, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah.
But people are like, oh, after 2 years, after 10 years. First of all, for me, it's like, if you were born here, you're a New Yorker. Everyone else is kind of faking it. But I will take the title. Yes, this is the longest that I've ever lived anywhere.
I think it's the next phase. But first of all, you're right. OGs through and through, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm not claiming anybody's set. I'm Philadelphia. But what I'm saying is like, when you get to a point, like I met my wife here, I got married here, I had 2 kids here. Like my life is here for 20 years. So when I don't care when somebody asks me if I'm a New Yorker is when I feel like more part of the community. And by the way, I'm not. I'm a Brooklyner. I've lived in Brooklyn for
but that's part of
most of that time. I know. I just mean that especially now, like when I go into Manhattan, I'm like, oh fuck, get me back to Brooklyn.
Oh, see, I'm such a Manhattan person.
Yeah, especially for truly the inspiration.
Well, so speaking of inspiration, today's topic.
That's right.
I think that is like inadvertently something a gift that I gave myself. The best gift I ever gave myself was moving to New York because of the amount of sources of inspiration that the city allows.
Yeah.
New York being such a place for creative people that everyone's fucking hustling. Everyone is here intentionally with a purpose. At least the majority of the people that I meet. It's incredibly inspiring energy to be around.
100% and indisputable, right? Mm-hmm. I know it's been like troped to death, but we're gonna talk to CJ later, who's probably like what, fucking half my age.
And a native New Yorker, I just found out.
Right, but like half my age, right? And still having like a different chapter of experience and inspiration that is drawn from the city and the people that are that gravitate toward the city. So all I mean to say, without getting too overwrought about it, is it's fucking real. It's real. People that want to create and do things and find something larger than what they've grown up in come to New York for sure. 100%.
Yeah. How much, inspiration is like a part of your day-to-day life? Do you have any deep thoughts to kick us off about inspiration?
No, I don't. I'll say that inspiration and creativity is something that has gotten harder to hold on to as I've gotten older, and older coincides with like elevated in my career. And now it needs to be a very purposeful thing. I need to go out into the world. Like I just did this yesterday. I went for a walk with my kids, and I need to say like, I just want to be open. I just want to like see shit. I just want to like notice things that I would otherwise have head down, holding the little one's hand and walking down the street. I have to purposely like be looking around and sort of taking everything in again. Like that's happened to me as I've gotten older. It was much more natural state.
So you have to be in like a state of mind.
Yeah, it's
channel inspiration.
It's almost
or to
like
receive it,
God. This is overcooked too. But like it's almost meditative. You just say like when I go out today, instead of being head down and on my shit and getting to the next like check on the list of what we have to do, I'm just going to be more open and just more observant of what's going on right now.
Inspiration is one of those things that's very active in my life. Like I'm always looking for it. I'm trying to balance it. I'm trying to harness it. Because inspiration's fine, but if you can't execute, then like you're constantly in a spiral or just going to get... I think a lot of people are very inspired, but they do not have the capability to execute. I try to avoid that.
So is it the city? Is it the people? What is it about New York that...
I think like my cliche thing that if you were to ask me what inspires me the most, I think my number one is people. I'm incredibly fascinated by people, and like not just people that we all know the names of, but like The guy that works in my bodega is so fucking fascinating to me. And I've gotten to know him over the years. But like, this is what I love about this city is like, you can walk down the street. I don't like think that I can feel energy, but there's sometimes where you pass somebody by and I can entirely like I'm like, you are something interesting that I need to like introduce myself and say hello to. Have you ever done that? Have you ever introduced yourself to a stranger?
Fuck no.
It's a very weird thing, but I got used to doing it when I was casting with models. You would have to go up to people all the time and ask that dumb fucking question. Excuse me, are you a model? Would you like to model? I got so used to doing that I have no problem going up to strangers.
There's a whole set of guys that will ask me if I'm Jewish when I get off the subway.
Really?
Like they introduce themselves to me, I suppose.
Oh, really?
No, like it's the exact opposite for me. So more to the yin and the yang of us being friends. Like for me, it's about the city itself. It's about the literal structure. It's about the smell of the city. The things that have no agenda, that are just there and have been there for you know,
there's a ton of beauty
of years.
And inspiration in architecture, in the city planning. Like I always am fascinated by the construction of Central Park. And I think like I will happily go on a walking tour. I've lived here for 17 years now. I will happily go on a walking tour to learn more about how Central Park was designed. And also it made me realize like we've stopped doing, unless this happens and I'm not aware of it, pitching like opportunities out there for creatives to be like, hey, help us design this statue. Help us design this park. That used to be a huge part of how cities got developed.
The World Trade Center was put out, right?
Yeah, I guess that's
as was the footprints from where the former World Trade Center stood.
Yeah,
right.
That was like bid out.
Yeah, well, it definitely, but they were put out, like they crowdsourced ideas for those things, right? I don't know. I need to read up on this, but I think the person who did the memorial was somebody who
so it happens, but it's not like as prevalent as it used to be. One thing that I will say is like creativity and inspiration are very closely aligned in my point of view. A therapist one time said to me, like, you don't have to wake up and be inspired to brush your teeth. Like, you just wake up and you do it. That's true. Like, not everything needs inspiration. Like, not everything it like needs that momentum or that fuel for somebody to execute. For me, when I'm looking for inspiration, it usually is for something creative based. Do you find that relationship as well?
I mean, there's probably an exclusion I'm not thinking of right now, but creativity is the output of inspiration to me, right? So I want to get into it when we have CJ here as well, but like I work in commercial art, right? I have done projects for which I've not been at all fucking inspired. And I've done some where I've been like wildly inspired, even for commercial projects. Different from like, I'll just call it like life away from work, right? So those things are very different. But that's where I find that inspiration comes from all types of places and generally being open to the sources of those things. And creativity is how you channel that inspiration into something, some sort of output, whatever your desired output will be.
But I think it's important for business owners and for creatives in general, like to think about their relationship to inspiration and like I said, to figure out how to utilize it, how to source it, how to even trigger it if you need to honor your inspirations so that you can identify them and actually have them be a productive part of, your creative process. I think it's like important to think about what inspires you as a business owner or as a creative, an artist, and to just not just like assume that it'll always be there.
Yeah, I think we're taking a very narrow view of it too, and rightfully so, because that's sort of topics that we talk about. But like, you have to find inspiration in life, right? I'm married to Abby for 11 years. We've been together for like 12 or 13 years. Like, love her unendingly. But it takes inspiration. You have to keep those things alive in your life. You know what I mean? So it's not just in profession, not just in creativity. Of course, we're talking about that today. But I agree with you. You have to be very open to the sources, and that's all I was saying. As I get older, you have to be even more fucking open, because you get that feeling of like, I've seen it all at this point.
Yeah. I think that I am like constantly inspired every day. I could say that I can point to a moment where it's like, yeah, that inspired me. And they're not always huge. Yeah. Like, there's small things too that inspire me. And I think it allows you to remain in a positive mindset. I think it like ties to gratitude in an interesting way. Like, I think there's a lot that can prohibit people from identifying inspirations and being able to then, like I said, convert that into something creative.
But it is a fucking luxury. It is a luxury to get up every day and find it and to like be able to use it in your job. Like, there's a lot of people out there that just, they go to the job that they have chosen or assigned and they make a buck, right?
Okay, but why like, does it need to be such a luxury? The one thing that I love about inspiration is like you can find it anywhere, or you can find it in anything if you want to. So actually I think it's something that every human has the ability to access. I just think a lot of people haven't thought about, again, proactively, like what am I looking.
Yeah, I know what you mean, like glass half full kind of shit, but which I'm the glass half empty kind of guy. But it's funny because I was going to ask you the question of like, you've done a lot of projects for brands. Not every one of them has been inspiring. It's just a mathematical impossibility. So what happens when somebody brings you a project and like, we came up with this concept, we sold this in already, we're looking for a production crew to come through and like better this in every way, but the core idea is the same. And you're like, well, that fucking idea sucks, but I'm doing this anyway. How do you navigate a situation like that?
It's hard for me to write off anything as like going to be not inspirational in any capacity. Like I can find an inspirational angle probably about anything that I'm working on. I think that as an entrepreneur, the biggest thing about inspiration is like knowing that there's this fantasy that being an entrepreneur means that you're constantly inspired and you're motivated all the time. And like, that is not true.
Yeah.
There are weeks, months, sometimes years where you're like, fuck this. Like, I'm not inspired at all to do anything. And then you just become overwhelmed and it's a compounding anxiety. Like that is a very real part of entrepreneurship that is not really explained that often. And I've experienced it. And so that is, I think, why I'm so now I've learned how important identifying inspirations and being able to, like I said, trigger them or actively create inspirational moments just to keep the mindset, that open mindset, and to have the outlook for it is so important, because it is, I think, a fundamental part of being an entrepreneur is your relationship to your inspiration.
Agreed. I just think it's harder for some people than others is all I was saying. Like there are,
do you think that people can be taught though? Like, do you think that people can?
Yeah, well, I think you can be taught to, like anything, you can be taught to sort of harness what you already possess, to identify and harness what you already possess. It's in us, right? It's like the ability to meditate or the ability to be creative or something like that. I think it's in all of us. Some of us just find an easier reach than others. There's also people that struggle with things like depression and shit that makes it just incredibly hard. But I was going to ask you, my question was like, what are your sources? Like, for me, books and music, top two.
Yeah.
Right. So reading and being like totally in my head, or music, I'm just very, I'm unlocked in an auditory sense. Absolutely.
Totally. I wish I was a better reader. I'm not. I try really hard. I'm a big like Audible guy, and then I will sometimes like listen to the book and read along because it helps me just stay focused on the book. It's not an ADHD thing. It's just
called hooked on phonics. When
no,
you read
it's just
and
that
read
because when
you.
I will read a book solo, I will typically be so fucking inspired that I will drop the book and go right off to do whatever. Like, and I'll have to come back and reread a page many, many times. I did that with Think and Grow Rich. It like took me forever to get through that book. But for me, it's people and movies. So movies, both scripted and documentary. Like documentary, I'm watching documentaries
all the time.
Because from my point of view, A Study of Humanity is like a good documentary. And again, I find people very interesting and inspiring.
I have one caveat I'll say, and this is not to be convenient because we'll have CJ in a minute. Still photography.
Totally.
Still photography is like, just like, holy shit, when somebody gets it right and you just captured a moment or a movement in time. Yeah.
Who inspires you? Who are your big go-tos?
Oof. Do you mean like artists? Is that what you're asking?
Sure.
I'll give you an artist and like an indie rapper. Two people. Like A$AP Rock is a rapper at this point, probably like fucking dad rap. He's got to be 40 or something, right? The use of language and having done it so fucking long, like I absolutely love. And then Marcel Zama. Do you know Marcel Zama? He does like a whole series of, God, I'll show you later. It's an incredible artist.
And so just by looking at the photos, or the idea that his photos were created, what specifically?
First of all, just looking at the photos, I can tell immediately what's Zama and what's not. Like I look at that and I think, holy fuck, somebody's brain came up with this, like just on the spot. They had an idea or a vision to execute something. Not that different from photography. Somebody has the eye to capture a moment and a movement and a mood, and they know exactly what they're doing or approximating. Like that whole ability is, I'm just fucking absolutely captivated by.
Yeah.
Captivated before I'm inspired.
There's only a couple times that I've stood in front of a painting and cried. Like art isn't my go-to for sourcing inspiration, but I don't think to go to the like Met more often than I do. I like don't actively think of that. I don't know why, but I'm like, oh, it's just easier to turn a movie on or like listen to this playlist or whatever. But when I do get inspiration from art, it is kind of one of those like a stringing, like a chord, like a deep heart chord. Art has the ability to do that, I think, uniquely for me rather than some of the other inspirations that I've listed.
I have a whole playlist on Spotify that is, it's just instrumental. It's all kinds of like binaural stuff and all kinds of shit. It's called Church, right?
Okay.
I will put on Church and I will go to like I'll do the little circuit, like go to the Guggenheim, the Neue, and then the Met. Sure, it's the art, and I'm like you. I don't stand in front of a painting and like, lose my shit or whatever. But it is the act of being in a temple. It's the act of being in a church that understands that all of this is important contribution. That coupled with the music, then I can truly be like moved to tears.
But see, that's you like actively triggering.
Yeah. Oh, I know how. Yeah, at this point, I know. Yeah, I know how to chase it. I know how to chase it. Harder at work when you get an assignment that has to be this, and this, and you're like, go find it. That is admittedly harder. But
but sometimes the inspiration, as cynical as it is, can be like, this will give me the check that I need to go and do.
Yes, one for a real, one for a meal.
You know what I mean?
Another thing to ask CJ about. Yeah.
Speaking of, shall we bring him in?
Yeah, let's talk to CJ.
How are you, buddy? Nice to see you.
I'm so good.
Thanks so much for doing this with us.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, it's very kind of you.
For those that don't know, this is CJ Hart. He is a little bit of everything. We've got actor, artist, we've got photographer, model, and just all around like really fucking cool vibe. We've known each other for a few years now, but you're somebody who I find very inspirational. And so I thought it'd be great to introduce you to Bill and have you a part of this conversation. So thanks again for doing this.
No, thank you for having me. I feel disarmed, in the sense
so
of...
much so that your shirt is unbuttoned.
Unbuttoned, I'm relaxed.
I like it.
I appreciate you being interested enough in my creative mind, how I do things, or just wanting to like amplify my message or purpose to the world.
I will say that like, and I'll get the kiss ass part over quickly, but I'll say that in my jobs that I've had over the years, I'm sure yours as well, you see lots of books come across your desk, right? You see lots of work of all kinds from lots of people. And the only thing I'll say, because I'm not some fucking tastemaker myself, but what I'll say is I know when it goes in that category or that category, like not ready yet, or, put this person on. And looking through your work, it's like fabulous. Like the perspective, the lighting and the motion, the capture. I'm talking about the still photography right now. There's so much more of your work. Just very impressed, and I'm glad that we get to talk today.
Thank you.
So when it comes to the topic of inspiration, I think like the first question is, what inspires you?
If I'm going to specifics, I think film, movies, one of my tops. Travel has to.
Fuck,
travel,
that's a good one.
Yeah, travel changed my life. I went to South Africa and never looked back. I went with Andre.
Nice.
Andre put me on to traveling. That was my first time I got out the continent. And I got to understand that people think in completely different ways than your little bubble. Different pathways are made when you travel.
Yeah. It's a little like we were just talking a moment ago about fresh air. I think of it in the terms of like in the air conditioning, riding in a car. And sometimes you gotta just put the fucking windows down to be stimulated somehow, right? Yeah. Same thing. When you're in your own shit over and over again, you're like, I just gotta get out. I gotta talk to other people, successes, struggles, process, whatever they're going through. It's not dissimilar. Like travel opens up a whole other community wherever you go, right? Yeah. Even somewhere as epic as going to South Africa. But you can go to like Seattle, for instance, Frank, and be inspired by people living a different experience there right now.
My family, we moved there from Jersey to Seattle, but I have to say, like, it blew my little 7-year-old mind to be like, wait, what? Like even the trees being different.
The watercolor.
So much about the lifestyle between New Jersey and Seattle is different. So it's travel adjacent, but seeing another culture, seeing another community is like, critical. I think critical.
And if you're open to that, right? Which obviously as an artist, I think that's your specialty. But like there are some people that are, maybe even in my own family that are like closed travelers. Like how do I bring my experience wherever I might go, right? Pack a bag full of my...
That's my mom.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Yeah.
Continuously goes back to Canada. And I'm like, Mom, which is fine. I love Canada, but she specifically goes to Niagara Falls. And I'm just like, you can do so much more. But she just wants to be comfortable. And I've grown to understand that not everybody's ready for certain types of exploration. It is a challenge. It's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Not every mode is going to go how you think it's going to go. It's really a throw up in the air. And I think that kind of inspiration can be a risk sometimes.
Yeah.
I think space is a very important part of the culture, especially expanding on all art spectrums.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the space to create, how do you make things,
right.
you know? Savant Studios.
Yeah. Okay.
Bomb.
Oh, yeah.
They just did like a collaboration with Brooklyn Circus. Swiss Beats is heavily involved.
Oh, I love Brooklyn Circus. I know all about them.
This one is Savant Studios, but yes, that's it.
Yes. Swiss Beats and Alicia have the thing at Brooklyn Museum.
Brooklyn Museum. Yeah. Savant Studios created a space within Brooklyn Museum for that art show, the Giants art show.
Yeah.
It's just nothing but creation that comes out of space. But what I was trying to get to, without that space and allowing creators to speak and express themselves, because not all the time it's about actually just making art.
Yeah.
It's about sustaining ourselves too, and like asking people for advice on like, how did you get through this? Or what happens when I'm at this space in my creativity or this space in my life? How do I get past this point?
I also think that space just allows for the community, inspiration coming from conversation, or if you need even to check in on your friends or other creatives to be like, how's it going?
Fresh air.
And
I think of it as fresh air,
bouncing
right?
it, using it as a sounding board is like so critical. Space is actually my end goal, is like big studios. Like that's the end goal.
Speaking of multi-hyphenates.
Yes.
I was trying to come back to that. We have our EGOT on.
Our future EGOT.
Can you give us like a quick snapshot on your own bio? Like, where were you born? Where'd you come from?
Yeah. I was born in the Bronx. Come from a Jamaican family, first generation. I grew up there till like I was about 13. Went to PS 78. My grandmother, one of the first art forms that I learned was poetry. Mm-hmm. She was an elementary school teacher, and she taught me how to write. And from there, and I didn't know at the time, but I was very interested in, I was able to make things.
Yeah.
You know, something that didn't exist, now exists. And then I took a little hiatus because I was confronted with, how would you say it? Basically just an audience. Mm-hmm. And not being able to control my audience. From a young age, you don't understand, like, why does nobody like this work that I've made, you know?
Was this family or was it friends? Was it strangers?
I had entered into this haiku contest. Mm-hmm. In that haiku contest, I thought I wrote the best poem ever written, and it didn't even get placed. And the person that won number one, right? The person that won number one, I didn't understand the poem.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do they see in this? It was like on some redfish, bluefish type shit. And I'm like, what is going on?
How old were you?
I was probably like 6, 7.
The idea of you being like a struggling artist at 6 or 7.
Since 7 on the ground.
Stomping around the elementary school.
Literally, I was so mad. Misunderstood. From there, I took a hiatus because I was like, all right, well, if they don't appreciate it, why would I? And that was the complete wrong notion to go into that. But I didn't recognize it until I got older. Anyway, fast forward, I moved to South Florida because I grew up in a home full of women at the time. I was with my mom and my grandmother, and technically my great-grandmother, but that was in New York. And my dad had moved to Florida with my 2 brothers and all my cousins.
So like all boys house.
All boys house. So they was just like, come over here. And then Florida is paradise. It's a whole nother situation. It's not real, basically. Yeah. So I was like, what 6-year-old kid doesn't want to dream about that? And at about 12, I got my first dream, got to move to Florida, went to high school, the biggest high school in the nation, 5,200 kids, Cypress Bay High School. And then from there, still didn't touch into my artistry yet, but my stepmom pulled me to the side one day and was just like, I think you should start writing again. Mm-hmm. She always thought I was gonna be great. She was like, people are gonna recognize your greatness through your writing. Your poetry is one of your voices.
Yeah.
And I started doing it for myself now, not entering into anything, not showing anybody anything, just accumulating a book of work. And then fast forward, I went to Florida International University, where I got my finance degree that I no longer use. Within that, in the middle of it, I started modeling. A friend of mine wanted to take a photo and enter this modeling troupe in FIU. After that, I just started making it for my interest. I just enjoyed it. And I got my first job, or first big job, with H&M as a model. It was like, I could do this.
Yeah.
And
how old were you?
This had to be like 22, 3, that range. And I was just like, wow, I can do this. Fast forward, I moved to New York, did some work with Adidas, got my first billboard, kept working. Then I realized like the modeling game, unless you're one of the tops, it's not gonna be good for your future financially.
So how did you come to the other side of the camera?
I realized through all of these accumulated relationships, I was in love with photography.
Yeah.
All of my really close friends, Andre Perry, is a photographer, and he makes work for a living. A friend of mine, Photodom, or his name is Dominic Lewis, but he owns a company named Photodom. We met in Florida, and he moved to New York as well. And we both came here, starving artists, et cetera, et cetera. And then we met up 3 times. We went to the March on Washington, met up 3 times, randomly.
So crazy.
Just bumping it, 250 to 500,000 people. I don't know the exact number.
Yeah.
But to see somebody just randomly those times, and every time he said to me, I'm going to open up a camera store. And, you know, those throw up in the airs by people sometimes, you kind of like, but something about him made me really believe it. And I said, when you open it, I'm buying my first camera.
Yeah.
And he opened it and I bought my first camera. Literally like 2 weeks later. Oh, what kind of camera?
Yeah, what kind of camera?
Nikon N60 or N65. I bought that camera, started taking photos. I made a pact with myself. I said, CJ, you're not going to take this professionally because you don't want to ruin your love for this art. You fell in love with it. Keep the love with it. But if somebody tries to pay you more than $5,000, then we can talk. Literally the next week, I got one of my biggest paid jobs to date.
Testing you.
Testing me. And I was like, let's try it out. And I tried it out, and it was a beautiful time. And
how did acting come into the picture?
Acting was actually the first dream. Because I was in New York, my mom was very strict. I was in the Bronx too, so I was kind of in the hood. So I didn't have any friends that I could play with on the block or anything like that. The closest thing to a friend was there was a police officer like 2 doors down, police chief, and his son I was allowed to play with.
Play with a cop's kid.
Yeah, right? I was like, yo, this is... So we used to go to the movies every weekend. And the way that like built my mind out, I've learned so many lessons from that, so much inspiration from that. At the time, there weren't many sequels when I was growing up, so I was like, I'll create my own sequel. So I just stayed in the room and acted everything out, made the sequel, you know? I didn't know I was doing directing too at that time, but definitely that's where the acting like emerged in my mind. And I did a couple short films since then. I did a play with Shabalala Self, one of the big artists in Harlem. That to me is one of my most treasured passions. I get to like really explore myself.
So one thing we didn't talk about, inspiration, it's maybe adjacent, right? But like the support of your stepmother to tell you to like, hey, you should start writing again. To have a support system.
God. Or for people to see something in you that you can't see or forgot about.
Do you think your creativity and thus the inspiration of it came from like nature, nurture? Were you born that way? There's other people in your family that are creators? Or were you like, you know, this is something you discovered as a child?
I think it's definitely both. I think I've been nurtured to see things a certain way, but I do think there's something that's innate about me. I think that privilege that I have in the sense of like, people say when I walk into a room, they feel a certain energy. I don't know what to attribute that to. I don't, maybe there was nurturing when I was younger that led me to believe that I would be special. So I can't write that off, but I do feel like there's a little medium.
There's got to be at least parts of it, right? Because all the support in the world cannot make you what you are without having natural God-given abilities and talents at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I even look at my nieces where I'm like, this could go either way for you. Like, you have the creative, like you have the ingredients there. But you also like could go STEM, like you could go absolute science, and you know what I mean. Like at some point, every artist has to choose the life of being an artist and like or creative. Like I think that at that point, then you start to
actualize.
Yeah, actualize like like I said, converting your inspiration into creativity and like and making sure that you're constantly productive with that. This
gets me back to something you said earlier about the universe.
Yeah, I think every artist has their own universe that they start to create. Once, especially when you've fully formed or have been en route to fully form your identity as an artist. I think you start to create a language. There's a wardrobe that goes into it. There's a system, like places that you go. People start to be able to anticipate your moves while also being surprised by what comes
next.
It's a beautiful challenge because obviously the universe eventually changes. I see a lot of dimension shifting in movies nowadays, like in the Marvel movies. Loki, how he jumps different.
You're asking
dimensions.
Okay. Not a Marvel. Cool. Quantum leaping.
I know, like Thor. Like I'm like real bad at that.
Yeah.
My bad.
See what I mean? I don't need to call you out. You do that all.
I just want to be very honest here. I was not going to help.
Let me just let you know. What I'm trying to get at is that when you quantum leap, when you quantum leap into another universe, you get to combine different universes. This was going to continuously happen. And then through that, your universe changes. Yeah. Like one little butterfly effect, somebody puts you onto a new artist or a new song, and it shifts your entire world. I listened to this song the other day. I was watching Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And this song came on.
The Donald Glover version. Fucking amazing.
Amazing.
That was very different, though, because the other one is really not amazing. The Donald Glover one is fucking beautiful.
Crazy. It inspired me in a lot of different ways. But one of the ways it inspired me was with this song that Brittany Taylor, I don't know if you guys know Brittany Taylor. Yes. From that group.
Alabama Shakes.
Yes. Boom. Yeah. Okay. She dropped this song, and when I say it literally puts chills through my bones, it played it on the scene that was perfect, and I was like, I thought to myself about how much music speaks for people.
Mm-hmm. She has an incredibly powerful voice. We'll play some during the break here, but please.
So you call it the Heartbreak Universe because your last name is Hart.
Yeah.
And so when did you identify that you were doing this, like as an artist, that you were multidisciplinary artist, like that it wasn't just you needed to channel your inspiration into one thing, but that it could be multiple things that could be related to each other? Like when did that awareness come to you?
Yeah.
When I couldn't just sit still and do one thing. I think that was the main thing. It was like I started to do modeling, and I was frustrated because it's a waiting game and it's about your physical, which plays a heavy role on your mental. Somebody telling you that you're not good enough, or you don't look good enough, or you don't fit this status quo that we're looking for, can really mess with your mindset. So you get agitated and like, all right, what do I do with this time that is quiet? And once I found photography, or once photography found me, I was able to spread that time, And then I was like, oh, I can really do multiple things. And I think modeling and acting kind of go hand in hand, so that's why I didn't bring that portion up. I think modeling is a diluted version of acting, but same thing with acting. When I wasn't modeling, I was acting.
Yeah.
But I feel like photography has amplified that more. I have so many more opportunities with image making that allow me to satisfy my creative needs.
And more control, right? Than standing in some kind of cattle call for men that all look at generally like you because we're looking for this type, right? And then you're like, and I'm sure they're not the nicest when they're like, no thank you, right? It's not it's not a bouquet of flowers. No. It's like, we chose that guy, get the fuck out.
Exactly.
Right? So then you come to the other side and now you're controlling your universe. You're controlling what you shoot and how you shoot it and what you create. Yeah,
I think that's something that also a lot of small business owners can relate to, or like entrepreneurs, when you start to realize like, oh, I don't have to cram everything through. Every idea that I have that is like expansive doesn't need to come from one entity. Like I, in fact, can create multiple different companies that are maybe related. Like I always reference like the Deamery, umbrella, but there are different disciplines within that are serving specific needs.
That are flexed, right?
Yeah.
Like flex up and down just as like,
and work in tandem. Like you were saying, the relationship between acting and modeling is very similar. Like, yeah, absolutely. So this is, again, going back to like why I think like artists and entrepreneurs are I have this theory about like, they're very closely related in terms of characteristic or personality type.
Yeah. I also think that the creative outlets feed each other. Mm-hmm. So my photography feeds my modeling feeds my photography. Things I learned, that was another thing that made me want to keep expanding in those ranges. I think they're all under my same umbrella of poetry. That's where I started off from. That's my foundation. So I feel like my photo work is poetic. I feel like how I act is poetic. I feel like how I direct and take my photo, like all of those things to me is poetic. So.
Which, by the way, is the fucking hardest discipline to start with, right? Because like a lot of art in general is about things expressing something you can't put into words. When you started out with the one, like, let me choose the words to make the thing, right? That's really fucking hard. So I was wondering, like, you know, especially we talked about like the audiences that'll listen to this pod and everything, like even just in and around New York, how do you open up now? How do you get inspired now? Like whatever it is that like unleashes it for you.
Yeah, I think definitely film. Going back to that, like I'll watch a movie and either the music.
What's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie, that's hard.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give you favorite movie that comes to mind anytime somebody asks me that. Interstellar.
Really?
That movie, I weep like a baby at the scene. Yeah. He's like watching his kids literally grow within like a 2-minute time span. Like that doesn't, like, my brain can't visualize that, but they put it into frame. And the use of sound in that movie, insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of my favorite movies. I'll give that 5 stars every day. Yeah.
I know it's a good movie and it's inspired me when I can't like stop thinking about it for like days afterwards watching it. Movies are one of the only things that will do that for me. Like
I'll tell you like a kind of shitty movie that did that for me, but maybe it's not so shitty after all because I'm like there's this movie called Babylon.
Okay.
It's from like 2022, 2020, something around that, right?
Yeah.
Like Brad Pitt's in it, Margot Robbie is in it. And it's about early Hollywood moving from silent film to talkies and the people that went through that in the Getty Mansion and parties. And like, it's a little thin. It's a like 3.5 hour movie, first of all. It's a little thin in plot and everything. And in the end, you're like, okay, let's be over with this. But stunning visuals in that movie, like the opening sequence in La La Land, right? Like just this massive choreography of shit that's going on that you know from a production perspective. It's like, this is a nightmare. I don't know how they pulled this off. Just really beautiful, but it stuck with me.
In the complete opposite of that, The Holdovers. It was recently like that one is still with me. Yeah. And because it's like such a intimate story about 3 people, largely about 3 people, they weren't doing anything extraordinary. They were just living their lives. And this film's beauty and the simplicity and the script, it was just phenomenal. And I think within like the first week I watched it 3 different times and I was finding new stuff every time because my mind as a producer does do 2 things. One, I, as a human, relate to the story. But then as a producer, I'm like, how did you do this?
Yes.
Like, how did you?
Yeah. I think that's half the fun, though. That's half the fun. You know how fucking hard this is.
And I find myself, when I'm really inspired, I'm days deep into YouTube afterwards, listening to any interview with the people whenever they're talking about like the details that they put into making the movie. That's like, I get so much from film. That's why I think for me, it's such an inspiration because it fuels me on the human side and then on the career side as well.
Yeah.
The point that you made about being inspired by not so good work, I think that is something overlooked by a lot of people. I went with a friend the other day to watch a movie and it was the worst movie I've ever seen.
No.
Yeah, the worst movie.
Name names. Who is it?
I can't. I don't even. Nah, I can't. Because they're big in the game. They've made like legendary movies.
Yeah.
But that's with the backing of the big corporations. But sometimes they want to do their personal work, and it is out of touch. Which is fine. Everybody has the chance to make whatever art they want to make. However, what I've learned from that is like, there are no limits to things. And I think we limit ourselves sometimes in like, I shouldn't take this. Somebody's going to probably look at it, back to the haiku thing. Somebody's going to look at it and say it's not good.
Yeah.
Or like, they're not going to understand this. And it doesn't matter about that sometimes. Like, you can explore different avenues of inspiration. And yeah, I think I became a better artist that night after I saw that bad movie.
It's interesting. I mean, yeah, that is really interesting. And I guess it makes sense. I never really thought of it that way. A non-example is as good as an example, right? Like shit I don't want to do and don't want to be is helpful to push me in a direction that I should have been moving in all along. Francis, sorry, please.
No. I was also, inspiration also oftentimes gets talked about as if like to do something positive. But I think like, people in this world are also inspired to do some really fucked up shit.
Sure.
Like as beautiful as we talk about films and movies that move us and stuff. But then there's like, I can appreciate the beauty in some pretty fucked up shit because how did you think to do that? Like, where did that come from? And why is my inspiration filtered into a positive and yours is into a negative? Like, inspiration can be a dark thing as well. And I'm just curious, like, for you as a creative, like, has that ever happened to you where your inspiration actually was something
taken
like,
to darker places?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think anything that's inspired by capitalism sometimes, if I can be honest. Sure. I was sitting with some friends the other day and we was just talking about like what would make our lives better, what kind of films, and everything was revolving around if I get a nice check.
Yeah.
Like nothing, there was no answer without the body of money.
I long for the day of like creative people. If I like, for instance, honestly, inviting guests onto this podcast, being like, hey, we're doing something, we're giving it a go. Like, do you want to try, like, come and have this conversation with us? It's an invitation, but it's also like a risk that you have to decide if you want to partake or not.
Yeah.
I miss the day of artists getting together and just for the fucking sake of creating, just making stuff. And I find that we are so money motivated that I understand there are logistics. People need to get money paid. Bill's favorite saying is what?
One for a reel and one for a meal.
One for real, one for a meal. And like, that's very true. But I'm inspired the most when I'm in the room with other creative people, creating with no money behind it. And it is just for the sake of creating something good or entertaining. Yeah. And I kind of miss that. Like, I also am the first to jump at a check. Like, don't get me wrong. But if you get me though on the right day with the right fucking pitch, I'm going above and beyond for the sake of creating something.
Money corrupts all, right? Like I'm going to die on this hill, whether or not there should be billionaires in the universe. If there should be billionaires, they should be, what is the word?
More involved.
They should be subsidizing the world of arts, of all kinds of arts, so that the creators aren't bound by like, well, fuck, I'd love to be able to do that, but I got to pay rent next month, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, money is definitely the biggest, is a very big one. But I think that a lot of people can sometimes use like religion as inspiration. And that can lead to some dark paths. I think like, even though that's the antithesis of what it was supposed to be, but it's become so manipulated over the years. But, there's so many different sources of inspiration that themselves can be dark or negative that then manifest something negative. I just think it's like, it's worth noting that inspiration is not just always positive.
Inherently positive.
And I feel very lucky that mine goes through a positive filter. I think, I'm not trying to intentionally harm anybody with anything we're creating, but it's like a lot of people do. Like that is in fact the intention.
I think everything is needed. I think
I hope that there's some cosmic balance in all of it.
Yeah, for us to know what's good or what's bad, or just to have any kind of language to it all, I think we have to have that side of it. If we don't know how to
value it or judge it, like God forbid the MAGA nation gets like a decent rapper, I'm like shit out of luck then, right? Because they're all terrible now, very easy to hate on and dismiss. But God forbid there's like somebody with a decent message in there.
Funny enough, one of the projects I want to pitch is a podcast about political music and just songs that have been used by political campaigns, songs that have been denied by political campaigns.
Political campaigns are making music?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Horrible. Horrible.
Yes.
But yes, they're absolutely making it. But also like when an artist says like, do not use my song, like that's, and all those conversations that happen. Yeah. I digress. What do you do to trigger inspirations? Do you go through spans of time where you're lacking just natural inspiration? And is there something that you could do to trigger it?
I think the benefit of doing so much just leaves me infinitely inspired.
Really?
How do
you have the energy for that? Because I feel like it takes energy to convert it.
It takes so much energy. I'm tired often. I'm not going to lie. But I've recently been able to balance it out and then just rest on those times. Anytime that I feel that I'm lacking inspiration, I rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the times I'm like, oh, my mind needs to be shut off.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to do. I took a flight out to Miami the other day and just relaxed on the beach with my partner. Just chill.
Very perceptive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do find it helps to lean into like, okay, it's not coming. It's not flowing right now. So I'm going to not force it and just
nothing fucking worse. Plus the output of force.
But I think you have to have a level of trust within yourself.
Yeah.
If you especially if you're a new artist, you don't know that's possible.
Well, you hear everybody talking about I'm grinding, right? You hear everybody like, I don't sleep anymore. I don't do this. I'm just committed. I'm obsessed with my craft. And to your point, like nothing good ever comes from that kind of environment, right?
But it is also the opposite. Like when it is flowing, I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing. Channel it, as quickly. Gaga says, like, you have to honor your creativity. And like, I find that to be like true with inspiration. Like when I am getting inspired, I'm absolutely leaning into it.
Right. It's a flight of fancy, right? When it's here, tap into it.
What about you?
What about me?
What's inspiring you? What's
inspiring me?
Would you say you're a creative person first or a business executive first?
Creative first.
Okay.
More than I learned to be like, we were talking earlier, like I learned to be able to speak enough on the business side to make room for creative in commerce. You know what I mean? In my scenarios.
So do you find yourself in a position where, because there's a difference I've learned between a corporate creative and a creative creative.
100%. And like if somebody were to ask me, and I have a lot of creative friends, and am I a core creative? Absolutely, I am not. I'm a creative for hire. I'm a commercial creative. Yeah. It doesn't mean that I don't possess those skills or anything like that. I'm neither privileging myself nor shitting on myself. I'm just saying that my job is to be corporately, commercially creative. My job is to reach an outcome and sell a number of widgets through whatever we can come up with in budget. And that's where the fun happens in that environment, is what is the creative we can do within confines.
Is there ever a gap between those two personalities? Like where you're so inspired creatively by something, but it's not being well received by the
100%.
The corporations.
Not right.
So how do you navigate those situations?
The best you can do is to negotiate, and that's why I think I say, like, when I learned to be business applicative, is I know how to go into a room and not pitch an idea because we feel so great about it. They don't give a fuck how great we feel about it. They don't even care if it's good for their brand half the time. They care that it affects the bottom line and sells widgets and drives revenue. And if it's good for the brand, that's icing on the cake. But when you reposition an argument for its intended audience, I think that's kind of a skill I developed over the years.
Yeah. Have you ever experienced this where you're trying to pitch a creative vision of something and the brand is not getting it? They're not aligning with it?
Yeah, literally the other day, and it broke my heart. I had to realize to separate those things because, like you said, that's not their intent, I guess. But it was going to be my directorial debut for a short film, which was essentially going to be for these two artists that they dropped the EP already, but that I think are pretty much legendary. I pitched a vampire love story. They gave me all the freedom.
Yeah.
And they said, do what you want. Yeah. And I said, okay.
Yeah.
And I built out this whole board, got a lot of people on board. And I had to pitch it, and I could see it in their eyes. They're just waiting for me to stop so they could be like, this is not where we're trying to go. And then they let me know that basically what they were trying to create was just visualizers, and they didn't give me enough information to let me know that. And the budget wasn't going to allow for that. I was willing to put my own budget on top because I believed in the idea so much. But that one...
It's a killer.
Still hurts.
It's a killer. And I think you have to learn to, at least in the commercial side, not necessarily the creator side, learn to depersonalize, right? I am attached to this idea until the moment I have to not be, and I have to set it free.
Boom.
I also think that you kind of got to play the game a little bit. Like when you're introducing yourself to a brand for the first time, unless you are already a top name, they are not looking for you to come in and reinvent their brand. Like it's always a delicate balance, I find, between like internal creative teams and the external person who's been hired, like a director or photographer. There's so many times where I'm like, you gotta trust the person that you hired. You've inspired, this concept has inspired them enough. You want their thumbprint on this. That is why you've done it. Yes, you have to look out for like brand alignment or certain pillars of color or language that you've already pre-scripted or pre-negotiated, but then you do have to allow for the creative to come in and put their spin on it. And I think a lot of creatives, when they get met with resistance in the beginning of their career, they take that as a sign of like, either I'm doing something wrong or they go egotistical and it's like, well, fuck that. Like, I know better. And your brand would like wishes they could work with me. Wait, chill, because you, over time, once you develop, like your universe is it's becoming defined. And that pretty soon is what people are going to come to you to look to, like, hey, lend that brand to ours so that we can take advantage of the mission or the statement of what your universe is. And so it takes a minute to get there. I hope you're inspired to like stay in it for as like, it only dies when you do. So keep, you know what I mean? It's like, keep in it.
The way I think every agency would do well and every vendor approaching a brand would do well in deactivating that bomb, to validate, then elevate. So an internal creative, teams that I've led, teams that I've been a part of, me personally, you want to hear like, I get it, I understand, you're up against it. Like you just want a little bit of therapy in that moment of why they had to bring in an external hire, right? The big guns to get this shit done. So you want a little bit of validation, and then you're like, all right, now let me show you what big time creatives do, right? But let me bring you along for the walk, right? Not just like, get out of my kitchen, I'll show you when it's done. Creatives in general could do themselves a bigger service by approaching brands.
They just didn't get the vision of the vampire love story.
It's
You'll
insecurity
find your
too.
brand.
I love it.
I think it was very brave of me to do that in that moment. Because I really just took a risk. I knew what I was going into. Like, even just saying that out loud, you're like, what? I showed it to another like working director, and he was like, if they don't say yes to this, you keep this and you do this later.
Yes.
And I said, perfect. And I've been observing, I've been on set recently, like assisting for some directors, like for Walmart or some pharmaceuticals. And I see how, what you said, like these brands are buying into these other creative universes, but it's because they have a track record. It's like, we can trust you. We know the numbers do well. What if you wanted us to just peel a banana, we're peeling that banana, you know? So I get that.
And that's where, like, from a corporate perspective, the brands that do the most talked about things are when they trust.
It's the freedom. It's the freedom to let people do some crazy shit. And that's brave. That's brave because that's a lot of shareholder money you're juggling while we take a flyer on me or you.
Totally.
Right? Like,
but so worth it.
In that vein, I wanted to ask you, like, anything exciting coming up for you, like what you're working on now, things you're currently, building? Other than Vampire Love Story.
Right now is one of those slow periods for me where I'm taking the time to organize everything. You know, I have some shoots lined up that but nothing that to me is spectacular or any bodies of work. I just finished a residency, my first residency with Between Space Studios, and that was more so a project of me documenting twins and for a deeper purpose, but nothing specific right now.
Sure.
I'm just trying to make as much art that comes to me in the moment, make as much community that I can as well.
Summertime in New York.
Summertime in New York. That's
I'm so ready for it.
Yeah.
How about for you, Francis?
I mean, like, we don't have enough time to tell you the shit that I'm trying to get done right now. My inspiration right now, like what I'm trying to be inspired about, is to just stay in the game with these ideas that I have, not get bogged down by the not finding the right fit or like the right team for the projects that I'm trying to execute on. You know what I mean? Bill and I have recently done this thing, which is a trust exercise, where we've opened up a Slack channel that is like ideas.
You can
that totally. I want to pitch, like that are, and they are random and they are raw and they are just flow thought, right?
It's called high thoughts. So it's shit that comes together when you're under a particular influence.
And it's everything from like books, TV shows, songs, concepts, campaigns for other brands. There's like so many
just ideas. Yours went off. Mine was like one gigantic idea that came to me, like, people really overshare with me. I don't know why that is.
That was just it. That was the thought.
That was it.
I listed out 30 things. And Bill's one was people share a lot.
And maybe it was because you shared so much. I thought people really overshare with me. No, I'm just kidding.
But anyway.
What about you? Are you
inspiring right now and like what I'm working on? Yeah. I'm at a crossroads right now of knowing if I'm going to stay doing this more on the consulting side and out of corporate America, or back into a brand for a predictable paycheck again. So I don't know. I'm taking a flyer on this right now.
What are the differences in the feelings between working for the corporate and then?
That's an astute question. What I think it boils down to is like the corporate environment for me makes me feel like a better dad. And the non-corporate environment for me makes me feel like a better person. If I put those up against each other, dad's going to win every time. Like I'd rather be fulfilled as a father and know that like clear conscience, I'm doing the best by these kids and this family, than feeling fulfilled like artistically, creatively outside of that.
Now,
I think
do you feel like you
time
can
is
do
over.
corporate and like, is there time for that?
Threading the fucking needle, trying to do
fatherhood,
do that. Yes, trying to find something that works, like where all those itches are scratched, right? A hierarchy of priority, if that makes sense, right? Like make these things done, and not some fucking altruism so I can sit here and tell you guys about it, but really more just so I can like sleep at night. My gratitudes at night start with my family and my kids.
I have beautiful nightmare/dreams about working for a brand in like a heavy capacity.
Yeah.
I don't know how it would work, but I think I would like to do like a 6-month to 2-year stint.
A residency,
yeah, at a corporation.
I mean, we were talking about like Ouija and like creative directing, and like that's all the time. Very boring white bread brands are looking to bring on creators that are just going to like legitimize them overnight, you know? So there are opportunities exactly that for like a 1-year residency as a creative director for a brand.
The same way that I feel about influencers sitting down with a company for a year and brands really investing in the next year of that influencer's life instead of moving on to the next one every single campaign. I feel the same way about it when it comes to photographers and creators who are actually visualizing their campaigns and their messaging. It's like, invest in somebody, like sink your teeth in for years, residency or however you want to call it. But like, don't be so quick to move right on. Like, utilize this artist for a while.
100%. That's the nature of our work together.
With it.
Right?
Yeah.
That's how we got deeper, you and I. And that's why like meeting new creators, that's how that all works. Like I will have an absolute predilection and preference to bring up CJ next time we talk about photographers. And you know what I mean? Like it just gets that way. Where you
accomplished.
Wait, what inspired you to become friends?
Me and Francis?
Yeah.
Oof. The body. I mean, look at
there we go.
I was going to say the same thing though, but
please.
No, I think for me, it was like, Bill is very, I gain a lot from Bill and I's relationship, and he's consistent with his friendship. And so that has been something that I find a lot of value in.
It's funny. We are 15 years apart, straight and gay, Brooklyn and Manhattan.
You're gay?
That's hilarious. On paper, we couldn't be more different, but I think it's that symmetry. There's a fit there that works for us. And we met each other, and it was like real recognizing real. Like, and by that I mean, none of the fucking artifice. Don't tell me about all the great things my brand did, and you're a full service agent. Let's just talk as humans. You know, we got to that very quickly.
Yeah, you can really feel the dance that you guys do. Truly,
one thing that I always love asking people is like, turn us on to something like that we don't currently know. Someone like who right now for you is like nailing it with what they're doing.
I brought his name up in the beginning, but Photo Dom, it's a camera store in Brooklyn. They primarily do film cameras, but he is for the community. Like, you can't make much money doing film cameras, but you can make a big difference through community, you know?
As a provider.
As a provider, like he provides space, he provides opportunities. He's younger than me and has mentored me within the photography space. My learning has expedited knowing this man, you know?
This feels like either Bushwick or Crown Heights.
Bushwick. There we go. There we go.
I had a 50-50 shot.
That's nice.
Like where this was
they
happening.
do workshops and situations like that. Who else? I would say sometimes controversial, just because how he's in the media, but I don't know if you know DeRay McKesson. He's an activist, wears the blue vest. He's one of the people, right? I've seen him do 1,000,001 things in one day. And when I said
he has that vibe.
Inspirational, and he doesn't really show it. So it kind of subjects him to that kind of critique in situations like that. But I've seen how much you can do and how much you can do for the world at the same time, because it's challenged me to think about how I can leave a good footprint in this world, you know?
Love that.
Volandis, he's a photographer. He recently just got diagnosed with leukemia, and it's hit the photography community very heavily, but it made me think about how inspirational he is to a whole assortment of people, but specifically to me because of how free he is in showcasing his work and speaking about his work in just a manner of like, this is the things that I make. I don't care like what anybody has to say on it. It's not motivated by money. It's not motivated by an audience. It's really what I want to do. And that really has left an imprint on me lately. Nastasia Simpson, my partner, got to shout her out. She's an amazing person, not only because I live with her and like get to see on a day-to-day basis how she grows and how it kind of reflects and shows me how I've grown, but also just like she's an esthetician. So she does facials and skincare and really lets you know how important it is to take care of yourself. This isn't forever, so you shouldn't treat it like that. You should uphold and maintain. And
did you meet through modeling?
Technically, actually, we've known each other for 10
Yeah.
years. One of my first jobs was at Guess. When I came in, she was leaving. She put her 2 weeks in on the day that I came in. And
so you had 2 weeks together?
Literally 2 weeks.
Okay.
But, you know, your last 2 weeks, you're there a little bit.
Yeah.
But I was taken back. I was like, oh my, she walked in there. She had the Beyonce fan on, everything. I was like, who is this woman? And I asked and she gave me her email. And I was like,
oh, that's a very good move.
Insane. I said, what? So I was like, maybe she's not interested.
That's one step from a P.O. box, right?
Yeah.
So I had asked her for modeling advice because I heard through the grapevine she modeled, not knowing that she did not model that much at the time. She had like one job. Anyway, through there, we got connected and 10 years later, we still tight.
That's awesome.
So yeah, plugging her in. And Mark Farrell, he's a big inspiration to me. He was the VP for Starbucks and now owns a rum company called 10 to 1. Genius. When I say is it like on paper, he went to some prestigious schools. I can't remember now, like Harvard, et cetera, graduated very young. He always says if he wasn't making rum, he'd probably be working to cure cancer. And probably still will do some like revolutionary
How did you discover
things.
this guy?
Modeling. Oh my gosh.
Really?
It's like the through line. Yeah. So one of my modeling agency booked me for a shoot. We went out to the Hamptons. One of the first times we went to the Hamptons. Met him. He's a Trinidadian, smooth guy. He's been somewhat of a mentor to me, but like also just being able to observe how he's built this thing that is important to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Not just the rum, but like the opportunities, the relationships, the sight. People feel seen, being able to do these.
Peak inspiration.
Peak.
I mean, truly.
That's cool. We got some research too.
Boom.
So tell the people where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, my normal page where you can just come and talk to me as a human is a Heartbreak, H-A-R-T break, B-R-E-A-K. And then for my artistry, mainly my image making, you can see that H-A-R-T break radio, Heartbreak Radio. Got to touch all the frequencies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then my website is Christopher R. Hart, HART.com.
Perfect. Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you,
yes,
guys.
thank you so much.
Thank you for having
very
me
much.
on. I appreciate you guys doing the research, being able to like
this was fun.
see my work and just, bring me into the spiciness.
This is super fun. It's super fun.